Good evening. Welcome to Friday Nights Live from the parish. My name is Corinne Ernie. I'm the Senior Curator of Arts Reach and Special Projects here at the parish. And while the museum is temporarily closed, I'm very pleased that we can still come together over these Friday night programs. And I want to thank our sponsors for making these programs possible. Our presenting sponsor, Bank of America, as well as Sandy and Stephen Perlbinder as additional supporters. Tonight's panel focuses on affordable housing and preservation in the Hamptons. And I know that sounds like an oxymoron, and it is, and that's why we're talking about it. And it is inspired by a project I recently did with the artist Scott Bluedorn as part of the Parish Roadshow. Scott built a floating microhome, which is all built from used or recycled material. And it's off the grid. And we placed it in the waters, in the springs in East Hampton this fall. And it has now moved to the parish where you can actually come and see it. And so he told me that he was inspired by the lack of affordable housing and also the disappearance of local culture, in particular Bannock culture, as well as climate change. And we will also look at how these issues are all somewhat connected. So I'm very pleased to have a very distinct panel of experts here tonight with me, and I would like to introduce them. We have Curtis Highsmith, who is the Executive Director of the Southampton Housing Authority. We have also Bill Chalev, who is an architect, and he's very focused on green and affordable housing, as well as Josh Halsey, who is a scientist and conservationist. And I would like to begin with Scott Bluedorn and invite him to talk about what inspired him for this project. And we're actually going to see some images. It's actually looking pretty cool. So Scott, take it away.
Hi, everybody. My name is Scott Bluedorn. I'm originally from East Hampton, and I live and work here. I grew up in East Hampton. And over my time living here and working here, I have steadily noticed a certain decline, not just environmentally, but also kind of culturally and community-wise, with working class people moving out of the area slowly. Housing becomes unaffordable, land prices rise, things are all connected. And I think that it was kind of one of the main impetuses for me creating what you're seeing now on the screen, which is called the Bannock Blind. And this is, it refers to specifically Bannock culture. And those who don't know, Bannock or Bannockers are the traditional kind of culture and people of the Springs or northern area of East Hampton around Accabonock Harbor. And they were fishermen, farmers, hunters. They were some of the early settling families. So these are non-native people, obviously, the first European settlers who settled in this region. And a lot of them did settle around Accabonock Harbor and became Bannockers, and they've been here for 400 something years now. So I have always been fascinated with the culture because they are true to their values. They're, again, they live close to the land. They're self-sufficient. They have these old kind of folk ways that are still somewhat intact, but this culture has been eroded, unfortunately, because of the problems I just mentioned. Among them also is climate change, which is a huge problem, not only for the world, but for our area in particular. So, and that comes with rising sea levels and acidification of our bays and harbors, and also the ocean, of course, which can change fish habitat and migration, which also affects, therefore, the livelihood of these people. So looking at what I thought was a major problem, building this small home is kind of a homage to them. It's built as a duck blind, which many people might see on the harbors and bays. So exterior wise, that's how it appears. And as you can see on the inside, it's a very non-traditional duck blind. So my idea was that it could become this habitable structure. which you could actually live in. So then there's actually solar panels and a wood burning stove and a large window, which you can look out on the entire harbor, where this was actually placed for a month in Accabonac Harbor. And it's actually a floating structure. So built into it is the idea that it can actually move, and it does move up and down on the tide as it comes in and out. And this is me and a couple of really cool volunteers actually moving the blind at the end of its tenure. And we floated it across the harbor. So it actually floats on industrial barrels. So it really functions really as a barge or as a duck blind would. And we actually moved it now to its current location at the Parashar Museum in the entry meadow, where it's now visitable. You can look in and sometimes I do tours. So that's also something that if you'd like to see inside of it, you can. And I had a lot of fun building it. Again, it's built out of a lot of used materials. Like the dome itself is a kid's play set, which was I found on the side of the road and thought would make a really cool kind of central viewing window for this thing, which was really fun to try to work into the design. And it's covered, all the grass you see is actually the very same grass that is surrounding it in the meadow, which is a native switchgrass. So weaving in all sorts of things and natural materials and found materials, it was actually a lot of fun to research these things and to put them together in kind of a meaningful, holistic way, which communicates a lot of these different messages, but also primarily housing. And the fact that affordable housing is in very limited supply in the entire East End. And this is kind of a tongue-in-cheek kind of solution to that, where you could inhabit a small floating structure. And it's kind of interesting to think that it's movable, so it could migrate here or there, or you could create entire communities using a structure or design kind of like this, which gets me thinking about all sorts of different possibilities for what a community can be, if it's a floating community or a temporary community or a small housing community. I think looking at outside of the box is a really, I think, important way to try to tackle some of these problems, because land use is so heavily tied to the reason why that there isn't much more affordable housing here. Again, that's the cost of land and the cost of living here, and really a lot of compound problems. So this was a really fun thing to try to put together and present to address all of these problems.
Thank you, Scott. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. All right, I would like to turn to Curtis. Can you tell us about your work with the Southampton Housing Authority?
Okay. Hello, everyone. First, thank you to the Parashar for asking or inviting me to join the panel. I will say that it's really, really refreshing to hear such a diverse group of individuals who are interested in affordable housing on the east end of Long Island. So I'm glad the conversation continues, and I'm pleased to see that you're walking the walk and not just talking the talk. I've been with the Housing Authority since 2014, January 2014. Prior to that, I was actually a commissioner on the Housing Authority. So I got a chance to see some of the outline of what the organization was purposed to do. What I saw is a lot of challenges and just getting to a point of creating a project, bringing it forward to the town board and then the community, and then actually finding funding. And there's just so much that goes on in trying to actually bring things from just a creative mind, finding an opportunity, developing the opportunity and funding it. So far since 2014, the Housing Authority has been successful. And I think the most recent project is Sandy Hollow in Spionk. We did a public-private partnership with a for-profit developer, affordable housing developer, and we were able to create 66 total units of affordable housing, one of the first pure 100% affordable housing projects here in Southampton. So we're very proud of that. Southampton Housing Authority also owns 37 units of senior housing in Hampton Bays. As I was taking over, we started transferring over from just being owner of the property to actually now managing the property. So we're owner manager, hands-on with the experience. And it's that type of experience and exposure that individuals are able to speak with, touch, talk to, and converse when there are problems or issues locally on their property or within their units. We also participated with the town of Southampton, where under the 72H exchange. Most of you probably won't know what that means, but when the county forecloses for tax purposes on either parcels or lots, they are repurposed for affordable housing. What they generally like to do is reallocate them to municipalities or for not-for-profits and have it go out for affordable housing first-time home buyers. We were able to develop, build, and lottery 20 homes since 2014 to present. We still have 9 lots that we're in process of doing now. We also built the first 3 affordable housing single-family homes in Southampton Village, which literally we took I'm a firm believer in making sure that whatever you develop it enhances the community and not take away. So these homes were built in the vernacular and the style of the cottage home, single cedar shingles, white trim. I know we all joke about that sometimes with being too traditional, but this was the beginning. When nothing exists, sometimes you have to create something in order to have success stories so that you can move on and expound from there. We also are currently working on a 2-family home with accessory apartment above garage in the village of Southampton yet again. That's received planning approval and we're waiting for health department. So there'll be another project coming up in 2021, along with the 9 lots in Riverside and another project that we're sending a letter of intent out for, which you'll be hearing about real soon, but it'll be an opportunity to take a pre-existing density, utilizing it in a modest manner, not increasing density at all. So using resources that are currently here for the purposes of affordable housing. And when I first took over, the very first thing they said is, you're correct. Affordable housing in Southampton is an oxymoron, doesn't exist. How are you going to make this happen? Because the main issue is no one can define, or most people can't define, what is affordable housing. Is it rental? Is it for sale? Is it Section 8? Is it, what exactly is the definition of affordable housing? And I think it's that unknown that causes the concerns and issues with individuals when a project is proposed, because we already have a visual from some bad experiences in other municipalities or in the city or New York City or in the boroughs, and we don't recognize that this is an entirely different atmosphere and environment, and that we can do this in a modest and in a more responsible manner. We just have to show and demonstrate what these particular measures look like. I think the Housing Authority has a nice portfolio of work now where we see that affordable housing doesn't necessarily have to be what the mindset is, just Section 8, low income, dilapidated, overcrowding. That's never been affordable housing. That's something people have done as a resort of not having enough housing. So what we would like to do is really work with the community and help out on trying to correct that misknown, that unknown, and create a better visual as well as example for the community, so that we can stop with the NIMBYism and create some more sustainable housing in the east end of Long Island.
Thank you, Curtis. I have a lot of questions, but I'll wait until we jump into the conversation.
Sure.
And I would like to turn the word now to Bill Chalef. You're muted. You have to unmute yourself, Bill.
Right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the parish and to you, Corinne and Scott, for organizing this event. I hope that people can at least learn to think about these things differently. That we that we take some myths and we explode them, and we take some conventions and have people look at them in a different way. I've been out here since 72, and my very first, quote, affordable house and so-called green or solar house was done in 76. We did that house at that time for $29,995. It was 1,408 square feet, 3 bedrooms, and actually had a heat pump that drove a radiant floor. And I was very interested in the technology of the individual home and building individual homes, because that was all the rage. It was the Hamptons back in the 60s and the 70s. The Hamptons were a hotbed of experimentation by the most forward-thinking architects in the country, not just New York City. And I went to school with those people and was interested in just following in that track. But after some years, it became quite evident to me, and the data backs this up, that if you build the greenest home you can think of, and now they talk about, zero carbon footprint or net zero buildings, where you're not contributing any more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere than you use to build the building and during its operation, though that definition is not quite as straightforward as you would think. That if you build that building within a suburban or semi-rural settlement pattern, then the energy that you're saving by doing that and your modest use of indigenous resources pales besides the operational costs of living in a house in that kind of settlement pattern. The built environment is the armature for the social environment. And yes, I'm interested in resolving the crises that we're living with today in a progressive way. But I'm also very mindful of the impact this has on the social environment. And Scott mentioned community. And I think the real danger, what we've lost over the decades that I've been practicing here, is a dwindling of community. Or we've also seen, you could say, a polarization, what we've been through in the last couple of years, politically, and we see that the polarization there has also occurred in our towns, local towns, East Hampton and Southampton, where we've created a schism between the year-round community and the seasonal community. And they both live in very different bubbles and hardly communicate with each other, although some organizations like the parish, for example, have done everything they can to be bridges between those two worlds. For the most part, it's an uphill fight. So in looking at that, I've decided that what we really need to do, and the reason I have this background up behind me, is to throw out the suburban settlement pattern, which Long Island famously started in the 30s and 40s, but most actively after post-World War II, and go back to the pattern that is around timeless and around the world. And that's what you see behind you. It's a village in this case, southern France, but most importantly, between the left side of the screen and the right side of the screen, there's an interdependence. The left side of the screen is a managed landscape. I don't like the phrase open space, because open space means two things: that no one is responsible for it, and that has no particular functionality. It's very different from the crazy minutia we get involved with when we talk about the zoning restrictions on the built environment, where we have all different kinds of places where that certain buildings are allowed and others aren't, and so forth and so on. But we don't look that way at the quote open space. And the other quality about using the phrase open space, words matter, is that it means nobody's responsible for it. Who is who is responsible for its maintenance and its creation and its maintenance, and in what way, under what kind of regulations. So I like the term managed landscape, because I think without us being stewards, then the unbuilt environment will go crashing downhill. And again, the impact on the social landscape, do we have meaning community, will be terrible. So this is where I think we have to go. I know it sounds very, very difficult. There's an enormous inertial investment, fiscal inertial investment in the landscape that we currently have, but that has made affordable housing impossible to achieve. We're talking about units, putting a couple of hundred units between the two towns, maybe every year, but it's on the average, it's been less than 100 units between East Hampton and Southampton every year for the last 50 years. And those units are an embarrassment in face of the need. East Hampton Town has a need for 2,500 to 3,000 units, and Southampton Town, which is approximately double, has approximately double that need, between 5,000 and 6,000 or 7,000 units. And they need to be all kinds of things. They need to be rental, but they need to be owned. But their form, how they sit in the landscape and how they relate to each other, is critical. It controls the cost and the kinds of transportation which we have, which we know everyone rails against and is very problematic. So I think I've said perhaps too much already, but I did want to lay out different perspective on the table for everyone to think about.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you for calling out the parish as being a forum for bringing, people of different backgrounds and different area of expertise together, and that's what we really like to do. Josh, you're on. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me at the parish. It's been a while since I've been part of a program. Excited to get back out there. My name's Josh Halsey, and I'm born and raised here in Southampton. I spent a lot of time on the West Coast, and the closest thing I get to building really is helping my friends with some tiny homes on their property, and a lot of temporary houses in mostly tents, for festivals and stuff. But I've always loved Scott's work, and I think being able to have all these different conversations come together is just so important. I've myself, just through my own experience with my background, it started really with geology, looking at the ground and trying to understand what Long Island was and what it is now. And the only way I could really do that was to learn about earth science, and eventually that interest led more to environmental studies, and just knowing what kinds of dynamics are happening and what we can do about them, which there are a lot of people in the world, and that leads you to the social implications. And my interest really focuses on soil microbiology, so it came full circle. And you never really know, when you're learning about a topic, and when you love a place like you do, what lessons will bring you to where you are today. So my day job now is in conservation. I work at the Peconic Land Trust, and we're really going to talk a lot about community, it sounds like, because that's all we have. And I'm excited to see future work that Scott gets out of this affordable housing project, and seeing what kinds of materials we can work with in the future. Resiliency is a really big topic that has come up, and I'm glad Scott mentioned that. I've been focusing on water projects, looking at watersheds on Long Island, working with different municipalities and varying partners, really with a common goal of of finding a balance between, the population issues that we face and where people are going to be and how are they going to have access to the essential items. So if anything, we've learned with COVID and just, being in this quarantine, focusing on the basics and having access to them. So happy to share my perspective and looking forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you, everyone. I think the notion of community and actually that we live in a place with very fractured community, or we have very different communities out here that actually never intersect. And I think it is really almost structurally that way, that we have that we live very separate lives in the Hamptons, and I think it's exacerbated by the notion of land. We should not forget that we sit on Shinnecock land. It sort of has a very troubled history, the history of land out here. And I would like to, first of all, just get a sense from Curtis of what you did say that defining affordable housing is difficult, but how do you actually define it? And for example, how many people do you have on a wait list? How does it work? How does somebody get affordable housing? How does somebody qualify? I just want to get to the nitty gritty and then kind of take it from there.
I'll try to do it by list there.
Oh,
Well, first and foremost, I think that I don't think that everyone recognizes just how large Southampton town really is, starting from Spionk going out to Sagaponack, including Flanders. So there's a wide span of area. Each and every one of the hamlets and areas and communities and village, they're built up of villages and hamlets and communities and townships. They have their own intermediate need, and they have their own concerns and issues. So when we go from literally Spionk out to Sagaponack, including Flanders, we're first and foremost looking for opportunity. Is there land available? Are we looking, and then what is if we find something or a particular area that is actually available, is it affordable? Because remember, we're still working and we're playing in a field that people who are doing things for profit are competing with the same land and the same opportunities that I am and trying to keep it affordable. So where I'm paying the same price as everyone else out there, and I have to have the same cost in terms of developing and building, and actually greater cost because I have to keep it energy efficient and make sure that the vernacular, the design, and everything is in a manner that is beneficial and rewarding to a community, but then still keep it affordable.
So you buy the land. The housing authority buys the land, and then
we buy the land. Correct.
And builds the units.
Every project we've had thus far, we financed, we bought, we've used the partnerships that we've had with a for-profit developer, but we've bought it. We had to purchase it. We had to do our own financing. We've used banks. We've used state funding, but we've had to actually go through the process. So other than the 72H properties that were allocated to us from the county, everything else is purchased. So it's very difficult from a competitive standpoint to find something, create affordable housing in it, and work a pro forma that it operates, not necessarily making a windfall in terms of a profit, but it actually can operate under its own rents and
so the money comes from taxpayers or individuals. How is the money raised for the purchase?
Well, again, defining what is affordable housing. Are we talking about larger complexes, single family homes, depending on the merit of the project? Most of the larger density projects, Sandy Hollow and Spionk being an example of the two, we had to go to New York State, Suffolk County, and other agencies to find funding to complete both the purchase, the construction, and the financing of the entire project. So that didn't come from necessarily taxpayers' dollars. It comes from 9%, 4% tax credits awards. Now, it would take me all afternoon, including the evening, to discuss what tax credit funding is. What I can tell you, and I'll give you the broad strokes. Back in Ronald Reagan era, he created an opportunity for investors, private investors, to invest into the creation of housing for communities, mostly in boroughs. And what ended up happening is it gave those investors a dollar for dollar tax benefit over a span period of time, usually 10 years. So that's how one of the many projects here in the east end of Long Island are funded through these tax credits. Another means is we're as a housing authority, we have the ability to actually bond. So we're able to actually issue bonds. For example, Hampton Bays Apartments is a bonded project. It's a project that we have, and we originally funded it through a conventional banking. We refinanced it at a better rate in terms through a bond, and we were able to do renovations. That's another mechanism that we utilize. Donations. That's another means by which we try to get and find funding to help out with some of the projects that are going on. But it's very difficult because most of the grants, most of the funding that's out there is very competitive market. So for example, whereas in Southampton, we had to combine two projects just to come up with 66 total units. Whereas you can go into Manhattan and get 600 units and have it funded for approximately not that much more, not that much greater than what we had to fund here. But because of the cost of land, cost of construction, we had to go and we had a fewer units than other municipalities. It is very difficult and competitive for our agency to receive that type of funding. New York State was, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry, and what is the percentage of the people that you can actually serve and those who are on the wait list? I would imagine that there's a huge demand for affordable housing out here. How do you deal with that? How do you?
If we divide affordable housing in terms of income base, Suffolk County has determines. HUD has determined per county what the area median income is for individuals in Nassau and Suffolk, based on low income, moderate income, and extremely low income. Section 8, which is what most people relate to affordable housing or housing choice voucher program, that we have a waiting list right now of 2,500 names. That means when I first came into this agency, we had 5,000 names on that waiting list. I literally had to close the list because there was no reason to bring more people onto a program when there was no way for 5,000 to become one anytime soon. So we closed the waiting list, and we're trying to manage what we have right now, which is down now to 2,500. On Hampton Bays Apartments, I have almost 200 names on the waiting list, and this is a senior complex. That's 200 seniors that are waiting. And with a senior project, the challenges are you're usually waiting for someone to either go into a nursing home or, unfortunately, the worst case scenario, pass away before a unit becomes available. So that's right. We have 800 names on an attainable housing waiting list, which is a general name of individuals looking for housing. The town has an additional 1,500 names on the waiting list. We have over 200 names on Sandy Hollow and Spionk. So we have a bunch of individuals to show and demonstrates the need.
Right.
It's never been the problem.
Right, I would imagine. I would like to turn a little bit to, again, going back to that idea of community or cohabitation. And so again, who needs affordable housing? How has the demographics changed? And I would also like to bring in Bill a little bit into this conversation because, Bill, earlier you talked about how, housing structures need to change and need to be more adapted to how people live these days. The sort of the one family unit is no longer necessarily the right approach, and maybe also creating more density to be more sustainable. So maybe Bill, you can talk to that, and then maybe also how you, Bill, and Curtis might work together, on such projects. So.
Sure, Corinne, and thank you for having the courage to use the word density. I'll use it again so that you're not standing alone, getting all the rotten tomatoes thrown at you. And I think that is the key. We have to have all our development in the villages and the hamlets. We have to do this for several reasons. One is because the single family house on a lot, no matter how small, is again the least green solution for providing housing. It's not the cost of the housing. It's the cost of any building is dwarfed by its maintenance and operational costs over its lifetime. And especially if you want to do a green building, then its lifetime is measured in hundreds of years, not by the length of the mortgage. And then, of course, then that definitely does dwarf the cost of construction. So we have to build buildings that are most economical to maintain and to operate. And that fits in, that's a perfect match, because people who need affordable housing don't need to be saddled with buildings that are expensive to own and operate and run. So we have to do that. And the best plan is to build, you know, higher density buildings that still walk up. I'm not talking about elevated buildings, although these days they should include elevators so that we can have a mix of people, against seniors and so forth. And the cost of elevators has plummeted since the introduction of the ADA, Americans with Disability Act. They're not out of reach, but we should have buildings that are walkable. We should be creating environments that are walkable, because community, the physical parallel to the social parallel, is that life takes place on foot. And we have to structure our region so that we're not auto-centric, meaning automobile-centric.
Which it completely is right now.
Which it absolutely is, and which is not, is not an affordable model for public transportation. You need a minimum of 7 units per acre to have public transportation. And I'm sure that number is going up because the cost of building public transportation is going up. So we need to increase the density of our villages and hamlets. There's room to create some newer villages and hamlets. And when we do that, and we're creating units, not acres, then that helps them become affordable. And we can still have a range of market prices. We might have penthouses that we charge, market value for, but we still have to have affordable units, and that can happen only with increasing density. And then we can share and all enjoy a true managed landscape that is open space. Again, I hate the phrase, but works together interdependently with the villages and hamlets. So we grow our food here. We create places where, again, there's a relationship between how all the resources we use come from here and return back to here. We create, like nature has, closed loops. And the more we model nature, the better off we will be. Not only physically, not in terms of our budget, our resource budget, but in terms of creating communities and a social landscape that is healthier as well.
Thank you, Bill. I would like to, before I bring in Scott and Josh again, I just wanted to quickly see how you, Bill, and Curtis, for example, could work together and also think about new, contemporary design, green design for affordable housing. Is that happening? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, that's happening. It's happening around the world, and it's even happening some places here. In Europe, it's happening in the villages and hamlets, and even in inner city units. Here, because again, we don't have a land use plan that makes land for these uses accessible and affordable, then people tend to go out into the boonies, and where there's a lot of land for less money, and build little villages there. That's co-housing is based on that model. Again, the problem in terms of making these things, quote, green or with a low carbon footprint, we can do that now. The design, engineering, construction community can do that with one hand behind its back. The technology and materials and the knowledge for doing that is not the stumbling block. The stumbling block is still, as Curtis will tell you, is site acquisition. And by using such tools zoning as transfer of development rights, so that we can build where people have not thought to build before, we can make those places affordable. I'm looking at building over parking lots. I'm looking at building in places, again, that where the town owns land and where the village owns land. And I think that, again, this is what we have to do. That solves our waste problem. Instead of all these individual new septic systems, 175,000 in Southampton town alone, we should have 15 that use a collection system, just the way we use a distribution system for our water.
Some of the challenges that you have, they're just not land acquisition. It's zoning too. It's community outlook. There are a number of obstacles that we as a community have to get past in order for us to have some substantial change in what our current housing portfolio is. The most important thing for me in the beginning is that we had none. Let's create something. So we had to play in the realm of helping and working with community, working with government, making sure that what was built was community sensitive. We've had examples of that now. And I think now is time, now we're in a really good stage where we can start looking to create more creative designs, having a platform that looks more creative and more from an architectural standpoint, a little out of the box with balance. And the most important, I mean, as a former chair of an architectural board review for Southampton Village, one of the things I've always tried to do in that capacity is ensure that whatever was built also had balance was around it, not to overshadow it, not to be so overwhelming that it takes away from community and tries to create the community into something else, whether it would be a house or whether it be a complex. I think Sandy Hollow and Spinock are good examples of doing scattered sites where one project is represented in two different hamlets. That's huge, where you have one east of the canal, one east of the canal, one west of the canal. It may take a combined project such as that, where we have them scattered sites throughout the hamlets of Southampton and do a large comprehensive plan to create more housing. We'll have the number of units that will attract the state, and also be able to impact different hamlets in a way that is that will be noticeable.
Thank you. I would like to bring in Josh and Scott again as the younger generation. And I know I've heard from both of you, that's a real problem for young people to live in the area. There's youth flight, which creates, a vacuum in talent, in professional workforce. And actually, Curtis, you also addressed this earlier, saying that a lot of people want to come back. But I would like to hear from Scott and Josh, what does that mean for you exactly, as young artists living in this area? And I'm sure you have a lot of friends who have left the area.
Yeah, so I'll say, living here for a good majority of my life, I've always had to rent. My family never owned its own house. We always rented, just because it was never a possibility to buy in this area in particular. And that was even true back in early mid 80s. I mean, I was born in 1986. Even then, there were signs of these problems, which just incrementally have gotten worse and worse and worse. And I don't know if it's any one person's, fault. Obviously, it's a government possibility to address the issues, but it's also the community's issue to step up and try to advocate for affordable housing for everybody. So I don't know if it's come through strong enough that the community wants this. But I think for me and most of my peers, we're all housing insecure unless you're still living with family or happen to be pretty extraordinarily independently wealthy, right? So I've been housing insecure for most of my adult life now. So, and it's gotten to the point where I'm not sure where I'll end up next year. And that's the truth of it. It's cold, hard truth.
Right. And somebody just mentioned also in the chat that it's extremely difficult to find year-round rentals. You may find a rental, from like October through March or April, and then you have to leave.
I think that's one thing that could change is the ending, I mean, possibly through a mandate of ending the seasonal housing rental situation where it becomes just so much more advantageous for people to rent for 2 months out of the year their homes, and then they'll sit empty for the rest of the year. Or there's a huge imbalance there. And I mean, the town could find out a way, I mean, to do it, legally or through some other mechanism to say that, for rentals, let's try to figure out something that is going to allow people to make income from a house that, is their right, but can also address a drastic shortage in rentals. I found that to be a huge problem where you'll see a house that just extraordinarily high rent for 2 months out of the year, and it just leaves so many people out literally in the cold.
Corinne, I really would like to jump in for a second.
Sure.
Yeah, again, and I'm responding to people I see who are putting statements down in the chat room. Zoning is really the root of this. In 1957, that's when zoning was laid out for Southampton, East Hampton. And again, the small lot and the large lot, the medium lot pattern, the suburban pattern was laid over the entire region. And that's been our downfall. And the more we develop those lots, the more investment we have, the harder it is to change. But we really have to grab the bull by the horns, as W.C. Fields said. He said, grab the bull by the tail and face the situation. We have to redo our zoning. These are words on paper. They're lines on paper, and we shouldn't be intimidated by them. We need to do not just cosmetic and incremental and move in incremental fashion. We have to do structure. We have to make structural changes because as we can see, we've crossed the thresholds so to where again we're in a crisis where our young people and older people can't afford to be here. So we don't have balanced communities. We don't have variety. We don't have healthy communities. In nature, diversity is the measure of health. And we are becoming less and less diverse, and we are becoming less and less healthy from a social perspective. And we really have to have a lot of small units. Again, in the villages and the hamlets, we have to restructure the landscape so that it works with us and becomes a place where people can work and brings an income stream back into our area rather than buying everything from outside of our region and importing it, which means we're taking our dollars and sending it out. And again, look at this whole model. Don't forget that the villages that everybody loves so much, that was the original model, just like the picture in back of me. This was an area in the 1600s, 1700s, the 1800s, where there were villages and hamlets in a managed landscape.
So, when you talk about, changing zoning and changing certain structures, if you have basically the community gone from these villages or towns, who is left to vote on it and who is left to advocate for it? And I think that's part of the problem. And maybe, again, I want to talk to the younger people or also asking Curtis, how can people get involved? How can people get involved in advocacy, to change these kind of situations?
We're blessed enough to have people in the community like Michael Daly, who has YIMBY rather than NIMBY, and he's out there advocating on the movement to allow and create and respond to the lack of affordable housing and workforce housing in our community. We need little initiatives such as that, where the community comes in and say, well, I live here, I'm vested in this community. For me, for example, I have a 25-year-old son, and I have a 20, soon 21-year-old daughter. My daughter's going to medical school. She's not going to come back here. She's going to be lost. That's talent. That's talent that our community is losing to another community because it's just not affordable to be here in this community. So we need we need people to come forward and speak up. We need young people like Scott, we need and Josh to come out and say, this is for me. And I like the impassioned statement you made. You don't know what tomorrow looks for you being here. I hear that probably a dozen times a week. And that's a phone call that I receive on a regular basis of individuals who are just desperate, people who want to come back home to their parents because of COVID right now. They've left their locations, they're living in the homes with their parents. And it's very tight, believe me, it's extremely tight for those individuals. So we have to be more sensitive. We need those young minds and young hearts to show up every time there's an application for affordable housing, to say, I hear what you're trying to what your concerns are, and density is a concern, but we have to do something with balance.
Thank you.
I
Josh,
completely agree with everyone here. It's, you know, I've been living with family ever since I moved back here before COVID, and I'm so privileged to have that. You know, if I didn't have a home base here, I don't know how I would have even returned. And this is going back, you know, 5 years or so ago. But one thing that really jumps out to me, I do want to plug the film Conscience Point, because on so many levels, you see, you know, what's going on with Shinnecock, and the way that it's been the living situation for generations to be in the same house. And the families are so close, and there's so many parallels, you know, across all communities here.
Can you
That
elaborate
especially
on the film?
Sorry?
Can you elaborate a little bit on the film? Oh, and Kelly Dennis just posted the link to the film.
Yeah, I highly recommend checking out the film, all about the history of the tribe out here, Shinnecock, and the relations going back to colonial time. And my family's gone back. I'm 13th generation to this community, and some of my closest friends are Shinnecock, and it's that kind of connection that we really need to foster if we're going to have a future out here.
Absolutely. Before we turn it to the audience for questions, I would like to throw out a sort of maybe a provocative proposition. And I mentioned it earlier that New York City government has embedded artists in various departments to help, well, basically to work in these departments and just to bring in sort of a new creative voice. And they have done that in the departments of housing, sanitation, and health. And I think it's quite a successful program. So, and this question goes mostly to Curtis and maybe also to Bill, but could you envision some kind of a program like that out here where, or you know, sort of an ad hoc basis where you consult with artists or creatives or creative committees where they could be more involved in these kind of conversations?
Well, I'm a firm believer, and I'm sure Bill would agree with me as an architect, any design is a piece of art. Any home that you create for a community is, in fact, a piece of art. There are ways that you can implement art into your design, and maybe even in certain areas where there are common areas where you can have art pieces that are being on display. I really truly believe that anything that will enhance any lot or a project or a building is definitely something beneficial for the community overall.
Thank you. We're getting so many questions. I would like to address some of those. Someone is asking, why can't community preservation funds be used for community housing?
We had I was on the panel with the town and other hamlets on the south. I'm sorry, in the North and South Fork, which are representatives of the Community Preservation Fund, to get legislation drafted where a percentage of the community preservation could be put aside into a affordable housing fund for the creation of affordable housing. That has not passed as of yet. It failed the first round. We're praying that in this new legislation and new administration that it would be more favorable moving forward. So it's something that is on the horizon, and we're just prayerful that this time around it becomes more favorable than the first presentation.
Okay, here's another question from Denise Silva Dennis. She says, with our year-round population explosion due to COVID, I've noticed so many more people working, walking, or running in the streets. To go along with building plans, who else thinks it's a huge safety issue to get more sidewalks installed and safety lighting?
I certainly agree. Again, what people are afraid of, there are a couple of words: density, elevators, sidewalks, traffic lights. But villages, and I have a whole bunch of slides from all around the world showing that and the other big word, urbanity. You say those things, you can get, I don't want to diminish the horror of lynching, so not use the word lynching, but you can get at least stoned and tarred and feathered. And it really, but those things define what makes villages and hamlets wonderful places to live in. Again, life takes place on foot. We don't want it to you don't have to get in, we don't want you to have to get in your automobile. So those environments, those urban environments with big plazas and big sidewalks, those are the things that, of course, we have to build. We have to build them that way. And the new urbanists, which now represent the majority voice of the planning community, have been doing that for over 30 years. And this is absolutely the way we have to go.
Thank you. And someone wants to know about Scott's solar panels. Are they affordable, and what are their functions besides lights?
Yeah, they're affordable. We're going to have to produce all our energy, locally. And we have two obvious resources out here. We have the sun and we have the wind. And the solar panels are affordable, and they're so affordable that you don't have to front any money. The solar companies will come if your roof, if you have a place on your property that's oriented correctly, they'll put the solar panels up for you at no cost, and they get paid back over time by taking a portion of the savings. So you want to go online to rely.org, RELI, and they have connections to companies that are approved and have a great track record of working with people, and you don't have to be afraid of getting ripped off.
Thank you. We're almost, it's almost 6 o'clock. I would like to ask for any final statements from any of our panelists. And again, thank you so much for joining us. I think this is a conversation that could go on over many hours and days, I feel.
I'd just like to say that we have to focus on the fact that the word affordable housing is very loosely mentioned, because affordable housing also is low, moderate income and higher income individuals. A family of 4 for affordable housing can go as high as $190,000 for a household. So we're talking real people, real individuals, the real workforce that have steady jobs, that work. They're not sitting back waiting for subsidy. They're individuals that actually are looking for the opportunity to own, but not everyone should own. And that's why I keep saying the word balance. There needs to be a balance of rental and home ownership, or a path to home ownership. There needs to be a balance of higher density and single family homes, not just all high density projects and not only single family homes. There has to be balance. And I'm so happy, and I think everyone knows now, the town of Southampton has a housing plan that it's been working on for the last year. I've been helping out with, and it's going on to now drafting the final phase of that housing plan. When this happens, each hamlet will have an idea of what the need is. Now we can work off of that need. We didn't have that before. We were just really working blindly. So that need now has been established and will be established based on this housing plan, and we could all work off of that opportunity.
Thank you, Curtis. I think the takeaway from today's panel is that we all need to get involved. We all need to know what's going on. We need to vote and show up. And with that, I would like to thank all of our panelists for being here tonight and everybody who watched and tuned in. And I also want to say that we are actually doing a tour next Friday at 3 o'clock outdoors at the parish for Field of Dreams, a lot of works of art, as well as Scott's Bonnet Blind. So come over and check it out. Thank you so much, and good night, everyone.
Thank you, Corinne.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you, Corinne.